and I don't know who he's referring to. I don't know if he's referring to me. I don't know if he's referring to Gareth A. Davis. It can't be you because your head's up there bleeding backside. Right? So it's got to be one of us two, right, about the observations. And I'm not sure that they're right. Welcome to Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. This is episode 33. Quite why I have to keep telling you what episode number it is, but apparently it's a prodigal value. Don't forget to keep liking and subscribing, but I don't like that line.
What about the comments in the box below?
Yeah, watching the videos and leaving the valuable questions in the comment section below.
There you go. But
let's get on with the show. Spence, you all right?
Very well, Simon. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm sort of bristling from some observations that have been made about my constant references towards your height. I remember my family have pointed out that it's bullying and unnecessary. So I'm sorry, it won't go on anymore, you little
I'm really pleased that a member of your family has recognised this and is supporting me in that way.
I only say that because I want people to be of the awareness that I actually do have a family.
You only say that actually because you know you get
I was born of
if
something.
You didn't say it because obviously this member of your family is
a valued member of the family.
A very
feels
valued
very
member. That's
sorry
what I'm
for you
looking
and
for.
your vertically challenged
Brilliant.
life. Anyway, look, an interesting week because we've seen the announcement and the conclusion of the agreements around a big heavyweight fight, a big British heavyweight fight that everyone's now obviously aware of because I've seen the press conference. You were there yesterday. Anthony Joshua versus Dillian Whyte, a fight that I think has a lot of appeal. And obviously, some would say a lot of jeopardy for Anthony Joshua, given that he has his eyes on other prizes.
Yeah.
And most notably the Deontay Wilder fight, albeit there's challenges around whether that's actually going to get made in December, maybe into next year. But you went to the press conference yesterday, and it was an interesting press conference. Anthony seemed to be very relaxed.
Yep.
Tell us about the day.
Listen, I think respect where respect is due. Anthony Joshua stepped up to the plate. He took this fight with Dillian Whyte, which is not an easy fight. You know, it's a long-lasting rivalry between the two. Goes back to 2009. Dillian Whyte gets his opportunity. And yeah, you've got to respect Joshua for putting it on the line with what, like you say, with what's going on out in Saudi, the fight that's been made really with him and Deontay Wilder. And if he loses this fight against Dillian Whyte, that deal's obviously off. So there's a lot on the line. What did I make of the press conference? I think Anthony Joshua, he was sort of relishing the challenge.
Yeah.
You know, he said it's something he went back out there, been working out there with Derek James. He said, look, he knows, in his words, the performance against Jermaine Franklin was I know I can improve on that a lot. And he goes, and I'm going to do that. You're going to see a new improved performance. Yeah. It was not. He said it was not a good performance. He knows that there's still improvements to be made. He feels like he's made those improvements, and he wants to challenge. And he said Dillian Whyte is the guy that will bring that out of him because stylistically they gel well together. Dillian's got a big opportunity, so he's going to roll the dice early. He's going to go for it because he sees this as a massive opportunity. Both guys were very calm, quite subdued and respectful to each other. I thought it was going to be different. I thought it was going to be a little bit fiery, but Anthony Joshua actually he sort of kept things. He silenced. Yeah, he kept things cool because of he just said when the question was thrown to him about Dillian Whyte and what he thought of Dillian Whyte, he said, "You know what I think about Dillian Whyte? I respect him as a fighter. I know how tough he is." And that sort of.
No, I thought he handled a lot of the questions very well. I thought the way he spoke about rivalry, the way he spoke about the circumstances surrounding Dillian Whyte, and I felt that it was quite a measured and comprehensive answer about the fact he doesn't consider him a rival. He considers him another body.
That's the one.
And I thought that was an interesting one because Dillian Whyte reacted to that. I thought Dillian was in good humour and was witty and funny with Eddie Hearn about the nature of how Eddie Hearn was patronising Anthony Joshua. And I think the actual quote was, "What does Anthony Joshua's balls taste like?"
Yeah.
And I thought that was, I know it's not the nicest and most elegant of language, but it brought out a humour and a relaxation. But I thought Anthony Joshua looked very measured and controlled for certain parts of the discussion that he was having about the fight that he was embracing upon and the challenges that were in front of him. He talked about Derek James, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he made a point, and I don't know whether that was digging at other people. I don't know whether he was referencing Rob McCracken or digging at some of the observations that Carl Froch has made, because obviously Carl Froch's relationship with Rob McCracken would make him privy to some of the things that Rob McCracken might have been saying, which was that I've got a proper trainer now. I've got a proper trainer. Derek James is the best. And I thought to myself,
Well, it was interesting because I picked up on that as well, you know, and there was, you know, there's Angel Fernandez there as well, and Robert Garcia more recently, and he was saying, you know, when I'd train with Robert Garcia, he said I'd just go there and I'd train, but I didn't feel like I was learning anything, didn't feel like I was improving. And he said, you know, with Derek James, he feels like he's gone back to the drawing board and he's been working on the areas that need working on it. And this is the one that really got me. He said, and the areas that need working on is here.
Yeah.
He said, you know, it's the psychological stuff. He's making me believe in myself again. And he goes, and that's the missing element right now. You know, the physicalities are there for Anthony Joshua. We all know that.
Because
it's
there was
all about the
observations,
psychological
wasn't there?
stuff.
There was observations, and where these observations emanated from is that he wasn't doing what he needed to do. He wouldn't run as much as he should do, and he wouldn't put in enough. And I don't know whether that's something he's recognising himself, because he talked about the fact that when he came out of the GB environment, he liked to be isolated. It was about him, and he felt that that was a methodology that he wanted to deploy. Now he's seeing the benefit, because he's in Texas, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
In an environment where he's working in a space that's very hot, and he's waiting for his turn on particular parts of the gym, and seeing the dynamic of a gym and seeing the benefit of that culture.
Well,
So
what he's got in there, Simon, he's got like Errol Spence Jr. in there. He's got the Charlo brothers in there, and so he's recognising success breeds success. These are top quality operators, and you know, it's one of those. He's gone into those gyms, and it's like sort of old school, you know, where they just all get in there and they all work really hard and they all get down to it, and that's good. That's a good environment to be in. When you're isolated, sometimes I've done that myself. You train on your own and you're isolated. You sort of detach yourself away from everything, and sometimes it's not a good thing.
But it's a
For someone
formula
like
that's
Joshua,
worked, though, isn't it? I mean, it's only a formula that in recent times, I mean, I'm assuming that ultimately, if that's the way he's trained previously, no one had anything to say about that until he started to lose fights.
Well, I think that worked for him, but now, like I say to you, since he's had the losses to Ruiz and more recently to Alexander Usyk, I think it's good for him to be around that environment, because Joshua's like a sponge. He soaks things up. He listens to people, and he sees, and he's around these good fighters. He's got a good trainer there as well. He's away from his home comforts. You know, he said that he's living very basic out there as well. You know, he's stripping it right.
Do you get any sense of certainty? I mean, obviously he wasn't prepared to discuss the game plan and what he was prepared to do to win this particular fight.
Yeah.
And like he's described, the Jermaine Franklin fight, it was important to get the W. That's what it was about. It was all about that.
Yeah.
I think that's a slight bait and switch, because I think it was also important for him and others around him to get the W in a compelling way, and he didn't. Right?
Yeah.
Do you get the sense that he's got one of the accusations? And I've heard it said by a leading trainer when he was going to fight Usyk, and one of the other fighters was getting wrapped up, getting his wraps done. Anthony Joshua was asking how he should fight this fight, literally an hour before he's about to go into the ring.
He'd done it on the ring walk.
And again, you've heard this as well.
Yeah.
So, do you get any sense of certainty in his mind's eye now about the direction of travel? Because he made a point in the press conference about, I could have made this fight against Jermaine Franklin easier than I did, and I could have made it harder than I did, and I did what I needed to do.
Yeah.
Do you get the sense, and he made again laboured the point that he's got very he talked about what you do in life is you see and then you do, right? And then he talked about, obviously he's seeing things now that are very different. And I noticed also that he started to talk about, a bit like a student, he started to talk about Kenny Norton, and he started to talk about historic stuff and how Dillian Whyte had changed his style. And do you see that sea change as a beneficial way for Anthony to start thinking now?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it was good to hear that, you know, Anthony Joshua recognised that there was more he needed against Jermaine Franklin, and that was maybe frustration that he's talking about. He's saying, you know what, weren't happy with that performance. Now he looks at the time he was happy with it. He said, you know what, I got through the rounds, and that was beneficial for me doing the 12 rounds. Now I think he's had time to, digest that and process it. He's looking at it and going, actually, that's not good enough. I needed more, and I think I think he's had more time now with Derek James. It's going to be beneficial, and it's important he's in the gym that he's in, with the surroundings he's in.
Do you think, Spence, that there's an element of maybe Anthony is adjusting to the landscape? And we're going to get onto some things he said about other points of reference that he wanted to make in that interview, which I thought were a little strange, but we'll address them in a minute. That he's picking up on certain things. Like, I've never heard him say before about not having had a long amateur career. And that now seems to be part of his shtick,
Yeah.
which is, I'm learning on the job. I didn't
Yeah.
have a long amateur career, because people have been feeding those lines into him. Carl Froch said it to me.
Yeah.
With all due respect to Anthony Joshua, the argument is McGuigan makes the same point. They think he's done.
Yeah.
It isn't just people like me that are saying it. It's people in the boxing world.
Yeah.
Some people might say, well, they've got an axe to grind. I'm not sure what axe Barry McGuigan's got to grind.
Yeah, sure.
But they're looking at it going, I'm looking at this fighter. He doesn't want to get in range. There's a feeling that he's still physically able to do it, but there's this little component part mentally that we've not seen yet from Anthony back in the ring, and certainly didn't see it against Jermaine Franklin. But the point I was making was that they were talking about this long history of not having had a big pedigree of amateur fights, and now Anthony Joshua is saying the same thing. And it worries me to some extent, as far as I'm bothered about it, that there's an element of picking up on what people are saying and being able to have an argument to push it back, and that's not necessarily going to advance him as a fighter, because what he's got to go in to do with Dillian Whyte is go in there and forget about what he hasn't got and go and do whatever he needs to do to win the fight.
Listen, forget about the long amateur career. He had 47 fights. I think he won 43 of those. He was world silver medalist, Olympic gold medalist. That's enough experience when you're turning pro. Won a world title in his 16th fight. That was probably too early, because now he's in that level. So you know what I mean. He beat Dillian Whyte in his 15th fight for the British and Commonwealth title. And you go, right, that's a nice level. He should have really then gone on to European level and sort of learnt his trade a little bit more there, but he's jumped from British titles to world levels. So now all of a sudden, when you look at it, you go, that was a bit too soon, because now you're mixing in a high caliber of fighter, and that's probably where it was. I think he had 12 or 13 world title fights on the spin. It's a lot of world title fights for a guy that's only had 16 fights as a professional. And I think now, where he's at right now is that he feels comfortable in these surroundings, and he feels confident in his training, which is the most important thing for a fighter. And he feels like he's learning a lot. And I think with Anthony, he's one of those guys that he needs confidence in his own ability to be able to deliver it. And I think that's where the problem's been. I don't think he's actually believes in himself enough, or he hasn't done. The confidence has been knocked and he hasn't had it built back up again. Right now, I think it has been built up, and I think we will see a new improved Joshua, and he's back in the mix. I'm hoping that. I'm not just speaking from the heart. I think the head's telling me that as well. By the way he's saying, and he looked very confident yesterday, as in he was quite quiet, but he looked in phenomenal shape, as he always does.
But he's very experienced in his press conferences, and he made the points about he understands economics, and the reality of this fight is I understand the business world that I'm in, and so I am quite comfortable that this is going to be a big fight. It's going to sell out well, and it made commercial sense. But what he also made, and I don't really like to, a lot of accusations are made about observations that are being made about Anthony Joshua, and he opened this door himself yesterday about the unfairness of some of the media attention that he gets and the standards that he's being judged by. And he made it specific to talkSPORT. And he talked about, about what he felt was an unfairness.
He talked about the hate. He said there's a lot of hate against him.
Yeah, but he talked about haters, and he talked about people that wanted him to do better, right? That were ragging on him to do better, which he can live with, and that made him respond. And there's always the haters, right? But that's just a fact of life, isn't it? I had a debate on talkSPORT with Eddie Hearn, and people like me came off and said Eddie Hearn got his head handed to him, and the people like Eddie said I got mine handed to him. And some people you can't appeal to. But he went a little bit further than that, and he talked about the fact that there was a sort of almost a bias towards the observations that were made about him in comparison with the observations that are made about Tyson Fury. And then Kugan Cassius and his motley little crew jumped on the bandwagon and started to make observations again about the ideal that certain people, and I don't know who he's referring to. I don't know if he's referring to me. I don't know if he's referring to Gareth A. Davis. It can't be you, because your head's up there bleeding backside. Right? So it's got to be one of us two, right, about the observations. And I'm not sure that they're right. And I've tried to look back on it and say, right, let's think about this, right? So when Tyson Fury put up a substandard performance against Otto Wallin, right, and got himself into a spot of bother in that fight, everyone called it out.
He didn't get praise for that, and that was one thing that Joshua was saying yesterday. He was saying, Tyson Fury, nothing was said about that. Well, it actually was.
And this is my point. So against Otto Wallin, right, he got criticised for putting himself in a fight where he didn't actually, he was very lacklustre, right, and he got himself in a very difficult position with the cut that he got inflicted upon him. When he fought Dillian Whyte, it got called a mismatch by people like me. when he sits piss-balling around not making any fights, saying he's going to sit on a belt for a year and not vacate it, he got slaughtered by me. I've written double-page spreads in newspapers telling me about his conduct and how I think he's letting the heavyweight division down. I've slaughtered the Chisora fight and said it's a pup of a fight. And the latest incarnation, which we're going to talk about later on, in terms of what's being announced or what has been announced is happening next, I've slaughtered. So I'm not entirely sure where this observation is coming in that Anthony has chosen to make about talkSPORT judging him by an unfair set of standards. This is the same talkSPORT that's taken boxing, dropped it into a mainstream media show that's getting 1.5 million viewers every time it turns on the radio, and giving boxing a real opportunity to break out of a niche mould and put it into the mainstream. And now people are complaining because people are making constructive observations about Anthony Joshua.
Everyone's got an opinion, and I say, listen, Josh, what you got to do is you got to feed off that, prove people wrong, because that's what life's all about. You know, it's like this.
Why don't you push him, Spence? Because he said it to you.
Yeah.
And I was expecting you. I've watched the interview. I know
Well, do you know what it was, Simon?
And I don't like some of those other nonsense in the background being shouted by people like Derek Chisora.
So that was going to come up in the interview, and the way that the interview went was Joshua went straight away and started going on the attack about he felt there was an agenda against him on talkSPORT, etc., etc., etc. So I'm going, right, so I weren't planning to go there, so I'm trying to pull him back to get him back on track to where we was going to go with the interview. And then we got this clown Derek Chisora shouting out, answer the thing. And I'm going, yeah, I am answering it, mate. It's called an opinion. Everyone's got one, and that's where we were going with it. And we done something on IFL after that, actually. And Coogan was, you know, bouting on about talkSPORT and having this agenda against Joshua. And I'm going, it's not about that, mate. No one's got no agenda. I said, they're just making observations. In the last couple of fights, I said, you know, Anthony Joshua was British boxing's hero. You know, when he won that world title, when he won the Olympic medal, he's only took stick from these losses, and it's down to him to prove them wrong. But I mean, and you know, I think he's got to accept that.
But I mean, I've never known a sport like it, quite frankly. For people that are such stand-up guys that have such a difficult sport to be involved in, then I've got some thin skin, because you can't say anything to people. You can't turn around and say, well, it wasn't very good, without everyone saying, well, that's a bit strong. Yeah. You haven't laced any gloves up. How dare you do that? Right? And the bottom line is that I'm trying to work through in an objective and fair frame of mind, right? Because that's what I try to be. Yeah, I do warm more to Frank Warren and Ben Shalom than I do to Eddie Hearn. Right? I do respect people that have built their own businesses and not inherited it off their father. I do have that in my sentiment, right? But I do also admire Eddie Hearn for some of the work that he does. So I've got balance in my views, right? And I do look at Anthony Joshua, and I do think that some of the performances that he's put up, some of the things that he's done in boxing have been commendable. But when somebody loses to a cruiserweight by fighting a way that no one can fathom, I think people are going to turn around and say, that's a bit strange.
Where are you sitting with him now? Like, where do you sit with like this current Anthony Joshua, where he's at now, going into this fight with Dillian Whyte? I mean, how do you feel about where he's at now? I sit in the same position that I've sat in on a number of occasions, right? Do you respect him taking this fight?
I do. I respect the fact that he's now been put, and again, this is not me attributing any reward to us. Let's have it right. They wanted a rematch clause in there. And it's because of people like us that stood in the media and turned around and went, hang on a second, because I had conversations with people that are very close to him and said to him, why has he got a rematch clause in there? He's taken 85% of the money. He can't have it always. And the argument was, he's the A side of the conversation. And then the argument was pushed back on, well, he had a rematch clause in every single fight that he's ever been involved in.
But Anthony Joshua was the one that actually took that rematch clause out, not Eddie Hearn or any of the team.
And there's my point I was about to get to, which was you asking me a question about respect for Anthony Joshua. Right? Because I believe that there's two ways that a fighter gets involved with fights being made. There's the way that the commercial guys behind him are trying to look after their best interests and trying to make sure that commercially they achieve the best outcomes, because the way it's explained to me, and I concur with it, is a lot of money gone into Anthony Joshua, and we've always had rematch clauses in there. And then I pulled it back and said, well, hang on a second, when you fought Dillian Whyte in 2016 or 15 or whatever it was, you didn't have a rematch clause in there. But the fighter's got involved now and said, and I think he's right to do it, I shouldn't have a rematch clause in this fight, because, quite frankly, let's be honest about it, Spence. If he doesn't beat Dillian Whyte, he's done anyway.
100%.
Right?
Yeah,
so
it's all over. I think we're all reading from that page.
The game's up, right? And this observation about Anthony, and I've called him in the past, and I've been criticised by people very close to him, Michael, about calling him a flat track bully. Because I think he has been. And by a flat track bully, I mean that he's beaten guys in front of him, and the moment he's had it put on him at times, he struggled with it. He struggled when Ruiz did it to him. Klitschko, with due respect, was a much older fighter, and I think there would have been challenges.
But he showed bollocks in that fight.
Of course he did.
Incredible balls.
Of course he did.
Career best performance for
and
me.
my question of Anthony Joshua has always been, what are you prepared to do? Because you're riding this wave of being Anthony Joshua. You're riding the benefits of all the things that have come along with it, and lots of it is very much deserved, right? And the economic returns that you've got from boxing are beyond even your wildest dreams, right? So now we're at this moment, this crossroads in your career, where you've misjudged Usyk, you've fought the wrong way in the first fight, and then psychologically you've gotten done in the second fight, right? And all that blew up afterwards, and he didn't behave himself well after that fight. And it should be said. And it's not, and you know, Tyson Fury, effing and jeffing has been called out by people. But I don't think, and Spencer, you're a fighter, and you can say this to me more readily than perhaps other people can say it to me, because we spend a lot of time together. I don't think it's wrong to say to somebody, I think there's real jeopardy in the fact that I think the light's gone out for Anthony Joshua. He doesn't want to put himself in the way of jeopardy to be able to get the outcomes. And I didn't see anything in Jermaine Franklin that showed me that the Anthony Joshua that says he wants to be a world champion again is going to do what it takes to go back to those dark places that only people like me can only ever imagine. Right? Wouldn't have the balls to do it because it's not my game, but can only imagine what you're prepared to do to have to do it. And that's not disrespect.
That's a fair observation, and you're right. You know, you're allowed that opinion, and you're allowed that observation, and everybody's entitled to that opinion. I think with Anthony Joshua, looking at it from where Anthony Joshua is, we remember this journey that I've talked about so many times, from where this kid's come from and to where he's got to in this short space of time. And I think there's been an immense amount of pressure. When he won that Olympic gold was the turning point. When he won that Olympic gold, he become the sporting icon of the company country. If I'm totally honest, it was one of those. Everyone, Anthony Joshua, he was over everything. He was propelled into superstardom straight away. I think there's been an immense amount of pressure on him, and when it started to go wrong, he feels that everybody's turned against him. And listen, whether that's right or wrong, I think he's allowed that to get to him, and that's affected him psychologically as well. He feels like he's fighting against the world. I think now he understands it, he's processed it, he understands it.
He doesn't, because he sat on a platform yesterday, turning around and saying those at talkSPORT have got a agenda against him. But and that's not on.
No, totally. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. But what I'm saying is, and like I said to him, and I said to him, Josh, what you got to do is go and prove these people wrong. That's what you should be feeding off, going like that, because you're gonna, like, everybody in history has that. Muhammad Ali had it. Muhammad Ali had it when he was boxing. They hated it when he changed from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. He become like, everybody hated him. Now he's the greatest sports icon.
Of course, it was also linked to the fact he didn't take the step forward, did he?
Yeah,
in the draft,
exactly.
Right? But do you think, honestly, that there's an unfairness in terms of the way that people like me speak about Fury than they do speak about Joshua?
No, I don't, because like, the difference when you're talking, when he was comparing that, I don't think that he's looked at. We mentioned Otto Wallin there. If you go back on that and you have a look, actually Fury did get slaughtered for that performance against Otto Wallin. But I think that what Joshua was looking at is in recent times where Tyson Fury's, you know, he's had those fights with Deontay Wilder, and everyone's giving him props, and they should be giving him props for that. You know, that amazing trilogy he had. So you can't, deny what he's done. So he's always been pumped up, and he's now recognised as #1 heavyweight. And Joshua hasn't had a good last few years, and so obviously he's not going to get the, he's not going to get the props that he should have.
Also, Tyson Fury hasn't been beaten.
No, that's
you're in a different space, Anthony. You've been beaten by the Pillsbury Doughboy, right, in Andy Ruiz, and you've gotten beaten by Usyk twice. So of course you're going to be in a different space. People are going to be looking at Tyson Fury saying you're undefeated. You're undefeated, and then they'll say, well, look at my record and look who I fought against, who Tyson Fury's fought. Well, you're trying to fight Wilder, and you're fighting Dillian Whyte, and Tyson Fury wiped the floor with Dillian Whyte.
I think that the problem he's got is that he's took it personal when he shouldn't take things personal. This is a game where people make judgments, and it's going to happen. It's opinion. It's a matter of opinion, and just get on with it. Focus on what you got to do. Go and prove those people wrong. You should be feeding off that sort of stuff. What do you reckon about this fight on August the 12th? How do you see it going? Do you think that we're going to see a better Anthony Joshua? Do you think he wins that fight? Will he make a statement?
I genuinely hope so. And not because I'm curtailing to the view that, I better say a few nice things about Anthony Joshua to balance it up, right? I have my overriding doubt that he'll be able to get back to a level that puts him back as a world title holder. But I do want to see him in with his big fights. I also, to be fair, I want to see Dillian do well in terms of having an outcome. So I'm sort of torn. I can't see, and maybe it's because my image of Anthony Joshua still is part and parcel of what he did to Dillian Whyte, 8 years ago or 7 years ago, whenever it was. I can't see. I think they're both slightly vanquished fighters. I think they're both going to come in with a slight damaged mentality because they know what it's like to lose. I think Dillian will be in a situation where my view is he's going to jump on Anthony and try and expose the weaknesses that he believes are going to be there. And I think that's his one chance. And if he takes that chance and he can do some damage to Anthony Joshua early, and I see things in Anthony Joshua that tells me that he doesn't want to put himself in the way of any kind of damage. And I think that once that's gone in a fighter, it's very, very difficult to get back. I think Joshua will win this fight. And I think he'll stop him, and I think he'll stop him quite early. Because I'm not sure where Dillian is in the great scheme of things. His performance against Jermaine Franklin wasn't impressive, and he will say, well, then neither was Anthony Joshua's. But you've never been a world title holder, Dillian Whyte, and the obligation upon you is slightly higher. And I think that will give us a feeling that we've got Anthony Joshua back, and then I've got a feeling if he does step in with Deontay Wilder, he'll get knocked out by Deontay Wilder.
That was my next question. If Anthony Joshua makes a statement against Dillian Whyte, if he makes a statement against Dillian Whyte, do you give him a chance in going into the Deontay Wilder fight? And this is a double question, actually. And if Anthony Joshua loses to Dillian Whyte, does that wipe the Deontay Wilder fight out?
Yeah, of course it does. Well, where's the attraction in that? I mean, I know the Saudis would probably still find some way to sell it.
Eddie actually said it doesn't happen.
The big question, I mean, but he runs with the hares and hump was a hound, doesn't he? The big question is this, is that with Anthony Joshua, the moment Dillian or Deontay Wilder sticks it on him and he remembers what that feels like, that's when we're going to see if the psychological connect between being prepared to go to that place where Anthony still exists. If he can deal with Dillian's onslaught, if that's what Dillian's going to do in the early parts of the fight, I think he's got the ability and the physicality to dismiss of Dillian Whyte, with due respect to Dillian. Now, with Deontay Wilder, he's a better boxer than Deontay Wilder. And if he's psychologically stronger and able to go to that place again with Deontay Wilder, there's no reason why he can't. But I just think the moment someone reminds him of what it's like to have to go to that place, I think all the alarm bells are going to go off in his head, and he's going to go back to what he's been doing in the last few fights, and started doing to some extent after the Klitschko fight, which is a little bit of self-preservation.
I mean, listen, I think from my point of view, I think that Anthony Joshua, if he's mentally in the right space, I think that he's going to have to go to war in this fight because Dillian Whyte's going to bring it to him. I'm with you. For me, it's like a 60-40 fight because I think Dillian's got a big chance because stylistically he's always caused Anthony problems. And he hasn't got that fear factor. He will roll the dice and he'll go for it early. Gives him a great opportunity. I think if Anthony Joshua if he can mix fire with fire and throw the shots when Dillian's going as well, I think that gives him a great opportunity moving forward in these big fights.
If you were forced to pick in this conversation the outcome and how that outcome manifests itself in this fight, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but we might as well just do it for the benefit of the audience. What are you forecasting for this Joshua Whyte fight?
I'm forecasting a fight very similar to the first one. If I'm honest, I think that Joshua may come through a couple of rocky moments. I think that Dillian's going to have his success, but I think Joshua's going to find a way to win, and I think he'll win inside the distance, in the middle rounds, probably anywhere between sort of 6 and 8. That's the way I see it going. But I wouldn't be blown away if Dillian pulled off the upset because it's not a huge upset. If Joshua does come through, by the way, does that fight with Wilder happen in December? Or do you think he's going to push on later?
I mean, what I understand is that they're still structuring deals and it's not likely to happen until January, February.
Right.
And that might explain why there's a relaxed perspective on taking a fight in August. On the back of a fight that would perhaps be 4 months down the line in November, or certainly December. So my understanding of it is that that's the case. And there's a few other things on the horizon that may even change the landscape, which we'll talk about in a second. Can you see any case from Frank Smith at Matchroom to make the observations that he was making about 1 million buys? It's a lot of interest in this fight, and I'm interested in it. And I think not necessarily I'm a lightning rod for anything, but I think there will be a lot of intrigue because we've been starved of fights. We've got Daniel Dubois coming against Usyk. We've obviously got Joyce against Zhilei Zhang, but we've got this curiosity, Anthony Joshua, and all that he brings, right? And this desire to see him back to his best, and then the rivalry between Dillian Whyte. This 1 million buys, I can't. Price point wise and platform wise,
I think if
I don't know.
I think if it was on Sky, I think it's a reality. I truly believe that, because I think that people do recognise the rivalry between the two, and they also recognise it's going to be a good fight. It will be a great fight. You know, forget where they've both gone to in their careers, and you know what they've been through. It's going to be a great fight. I think that you can still get it on the Sky platform, but with the DAZN platform, I reckon you might get 500,000 buys, 600,000, something like that, somewhere around them things. I think 1 million maybe a little bit optimistic, if I'm totally honest, but like, I think if it was on the Sky platform, you probably would hit that. There's a lot of interest there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the more places that are broadcasting boxing, the better it is.
Yeah,
I don't have any particular dog in the fight to see DAZN be successful or unsuccessful. If they can get 1 million buys, then it will justify some of the investment.
It's not beyond the realms. I think, you know, it's a possibility.
It's a lot of buys.
Yeah.
It's a lot of buys, and it's a lot of expectation to achieve that at a price point which is pricey. You know, the 26.99 isn't. You know, they're using the Joshua effect to justify that price tag. But we'll see. When you were having your little moment to share with Eddie Hearn, whilst he was debating about the unfairness of talkSPORT, whilst begging and pleading to come on and do another show with us to promote the Whyte.
His exact words
Joshua
were,
fight.
"I'm glad that it's you representing talkSPORT, because you're the only one that's dug your flag in the sand."
Yeah, I heard it, absolutely. Whilst pleading to come back on and do another show with me to debate the Whyte, or to set up the Whyte Joshua fight. Did you ask Eddie about Alex Krusuk's claim about Tyson Fury needing to be stripped?
Yeah, I did. And fair play to Eddie. He said, you know, he thinks that's a little unfair. He said, yeah, he thinks that he should be mandatories. He thinks that that's wrong from the WBC. Not, you know,
well, they're ridiculous.
Not
nonsense.
mandating anyone. But he said, look, Tyson Fury taking on Ngannou, Francis Ngannou, shouldn't mean that he's stripped of the title. He said, I think that's slightly unfair to him. So yeah, fair play to him for that.
Interesting that, Spence, because obviously it's now been announced that is indeed the fight that Tyson Fury's involved in.
Yeah.
And in the Middle East, Francis Ngannou. I'm not enamoured with this fight, and I've told Frank Warren I think it's and I'm disappointed to see the WBC champion of the world fighting in an exhibition fight. So it's not an exhibition fight. There'll be knockdown rules. But this is not. This is the WBC champion of the world fighting Thunderlips.
But do you know what it is? I understand this. Do you know why I understand it? It's
money.
From the business point of view. Look, he's
money.
going to get a phenomenal amount of money. You know, I think Frank and Tyson have tried to get fighters to step up to the plate, take the fight for this summer. They couldn't get anyone over the line. The financial demands were too much. Ruiz wanted, 20-odd million quid. That financially was never going to stack up. And
do you subscribe to that view? Because everyone that hears that will say to you and I, oh, that's great. When Eddie Hearn don't make a fight, and when Anthony Joshua's not fighting, we're all over them.
Yeah.
When Tyson Fury's not fighting, all of a sudden it's because everyone else wants too much money.
Yeah. Well, listen, that's coming from Frank, wasn't it? That
I know, but my question of us is, when I tried to hold Frank to a higher standard the other day when he was on the show, saying, oh, come on, Frank, that's a crock. It's a crap fight. Nobody wants to see it. The Chisora fight was a crap fight. You've had this going on for a little bit now. It's because Tyson's so bleeding difficult to deal with and prices himself out of the equation. But
don't you find the Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou fight quite fascinating? What I'm saying is there's going to be a crossover. The box office numbers are going to do mad, you know. Like, from a business point of view, I understand it. From a legacy point of view, you know, he's not doing anything for that.
Tyson Fury's going to bash him up in an easy style.
But how many
a bunch of people are going to give him a load of money for it.
How many people will buy that?
Oh, listen, what I want to hear, and I hope to hear from Tyson Fury's mouth, is this is purely and simply about money. This is a business transaction. We're prize fighters. Let's dress it up for what it is, right? It's a crossover fight. It opens another avenue for me. And you know what? I'm going to get paid. He does his little videos telling everyone how much money he's got and how everyone should sit there with the mean-spirited little piles of money, or whatever he said recently on his latest video. Let's have this one said for what it is. I don't think it's admirable. I don't think it's impressive. And I don't think it's reflective of what I believe it should be considered the generational great of fighters fighting Francis Ngannou. But it kind of is what it is, and all I want to hear is people say, well, it's a shit fight, it's not becoming of the heavyweight champion of the world, but good job you're getting paid, mate. I'm really pleased for you.
Entertainment value, and it is what it is. The $1 million question is, though, Simon, will him and Usyk happen? I know you're talking about January, February time. I think that Tyson Fury gets his little outing as well, which he's been looking for. It doesn't matter who the opponent is.
Yeah, it's not much.
Do we see Usyk versus Fury in February out in Saudi Arabia?
It depends if Daniel Dubois don't knock him out.
But if Daniel Dubois doesn't knock him out,
you know, Frank Warren will have you believe that Daniel Dubois. I mean, looking at the press conference and looking at the face-off, Daniel didn't.
No, but that's fair enough.
Didn't look in his best nick. Looking at Usyk, a little bit unsure.
Yeah.
In fairness, it's it's.
Do you know what though? Like Daniel Dubois, where he's young, right? He's a little. He'll be a little bit fearless, and he knows the instructions. Don Charles, who's training him, Daniel's been training him in Finchley in our gym actually.
Yeah.
And Don said, look, he's been looking really good, but we know what we got to do. We got to go out there. Derek Chisora, who showed the blueprint on how to beat Usyk, is by bullying him. I said Daniel Dubois is younger, he's fresher, he's got quick hands, and he's heavy-handed. He's just got to roll the dice and take it to him.
Yeah.
You know, take that gamble.
Agreed. I mean, I think technically that Usyk will find his way out of that problem.
Of course he will.
Do I think that Usyk will fight Fury? Yeah, I do. And do I think with the latest developments with Frank Warren and what's going on in the Middle East, it'll give an opportunity for the money to be there? Because it's about the money.
Yeah.
It's about the money. It's about the money for Usyk. That's why Sky has signed Skills Challenge, because I think there's an opportunity there. With what Frank's doing, I think it'll open up a different dimension and might make a few people...
And this is not Skills Challenge.
No, make a few people look at things slightly differently. But listen, if it gets the big fights on, quite frankly, I don't care who the money comes from. I'd much prefer the fights to be in England or the fights to be in America, as it once was before. But this Middle Eastern stuff isn't going to go away.
Yeah.
So now they've got to find a way to overcome some of the barriers. And whether Skills Challenge have provided as many problems as they've provided solutions, let's see what the latest incarnation of what Frank Warren's doing is going to be producing outcomes, because quite frankly, he thinks it is.
Do you give Daniel a shot, by the way?
Yeah, I do, but not much of one.
Yeah.
Not much of one. I do. I think he's got a decent chance. Depends if he can do what Derek Chisora did to Alexander Usyk, as well as lay some proper leather on him.
Yeah, well, he's just got to take it to him and let his hands go.
Obviously, we've got an expected outcome this week, a projected outcome this week. We had lots of discussion last week about the medical scenarios surrounding Conor Benn and this new group of guys that have been working with him to provide him with a solution as to how clomiphene was found in his system, discussed metabolites and what that happens and how his body couldn't have possibly produced it, given the uniqueness of his construct with the production of estrogen and all that sort of stuff. We're now talking about, Hearn was talking about an outcome at the beginning of this week. We're at the beginning of this week, so now we're talking about it during the course of this week.
I think we get it this week, to be fair. I think they're very close.
And they're talking about a fight on September the 23rd.
Wembley or Tottenham? Yeah, Wembley, Tottenham.
Yeah.
Chris
I don't
Eubank
see
Jr.
how it can be at Tottenham, because the football season will be there.
Well, they're the venues that I've heard.
Obviously, we've heard a lot of noise in recent times about the manner in which Conor Benn might be able to get himself up underneath, right? And we had the experts on last week that discussed with me all the different dynamics of the reasons why they've got a compelling argument.
Yeah.
Let's say that they're able to achieve that. Eddie Hearn is now talking about a September 23rd fight with Chris Eubank Jr.
I can't see that.
But again, I was going to ask you the question, how can that be? Because I thought we'd a signed fight that boxing were putting on with Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr.
Well, on September the 2nd. Yeah, but it's not that.
As it moved to September the 2nd, because I thought it was in August.
Yeah, it's gone to September the 2nd.
Right.
So they're talking about Liam Smith versus Chris Eubank Jr. September the 2nd is the proposed date that they were looking at, right? But then you've heard this now. So Chris Eubank Jr. has obviously not signed anything, waiting to see what's going on with Conor Benn. And they're talking about September the 23rd.
Well, he must have signed it.
I just can't see.
No, but it's not a case of he hasn't signed it. He signed a contract as the first instance.
Absolutely. No, I agree. No,
so it's not a case he hasn't signed a contract.
Yeah.
He signed a contract. Whether or
I
not...
don't know how tight that contract is. What I'm saying is I don't know...
Well, I should imagine it's as tight as the contract that enabled them to fight in the first place.
Yeah,
they signed a contract, they had a fight, and it had a rematch clause in it.
Yeah, I get it.
So
Understood.
What we on about?
Yeah, but I've spoke to Ben about this situation, and he's I've talked to him about this whole Conor Benn situation. Would that come before the Conor Benn fight if Conor gets cleared or whatever? And he didn't go one way or the other on it. He said, we'll just have to see how it all plays out.
Well, let's see
what happens.
I just want to touch on very quickly, and perhaps we'll expand upon it on another show slightly bigger. I bumped into Josh Warrington the other day.
Yeah.
And obviously the Warrington Wood fight is on.
Yes.
What do you make of that? I think it's a great fight.
It's a great
I think it's a
fight.
great opportunity for
I
Josh
like
Warrington,
it.
quite frankly, because I think he's a little bit more in the wilderness. Lee Wood's regained his position now at the top of the food chain again.
Yeah, Josh has sort of
Certainly
lost 3 of his
as a world
last 4,
champion.
hasn't he? And
Yeah.
he come off that last fight against Humberto Lopez, actually. He lost a unanimous decision there. Lee Wood won against Mauricio Lara, puts him back
who,
up there
by the
again.
way, had dealt with Josh
Absolutely.
in the first fight and
Yeah.
was likely to deal with him in the second.
Yeah. So, look, I think that where are they positioned right now? I think that...
It's in Sheffield, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's in Sheffield, isn't it?
Sheffield,
Yeah.
yeah. I think where are they positioned with this fight right now? I think Lee Wood's got the momentum with him. I think he's the one that would start, probably a heavy favourite going into that one. I think that Josh Warrington looks like, you know, he's had a long, hard career, Josh, and it looks like the wear and tear maybe he's starting to slow up a little bit, and, you know, Josh...
Be a good fight, though.
It'd be a great fight.
And I think Josh will throw the kitchen sink at it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not writing him off at all. I just think that where they're situated right now, I think Lee Wood got the momentum with him, very heavy-handed, great boxing IQ, and I think he'd just have the edge in that one.
Okay. You're picking Lee Wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Josh. I think I'm going to go the same. Right, Spence, that's it for episode 33, just in case you didn't get that first time round. Don't forget to keep liking and subscribing, watching the videos. It's myself and Spencer. We'll see you next time out.